Hi everyone, and welcome back. Angie Hayes here, and this is my third video in my series where I'm talking about dysfunctional behaviour and toxic family relationships. Although this dysfunctional behaviour can spill over into workplace situations with a boss that tells you to just JFDI, or who dismisses you or is rude. It can be in a relationship. So I'm hoping that I'm starting to explain some of the dynamics that are going on here, in order for you to help you to spot what's going on, because this is one of the key things. People don't recognize the behavior for what it is. So actually to behave it, can't speak today, how to recognize it, how to deal with it, how to manage it so that you don't become all consumed by it. But there's one dynamic I wanted to drill down into a bit more in this video, and that's that whole thing around acceptance. When we can accept crap that's going on with us, and we can set appropriate expectations so that we don't get disappointed and worried when our expectations don't get met. Because sometimes when an expectation is set up and then it isn't met, we can go into panic mode. And guess who comes to the party then? Yes, there's my little mate, Bartholomew's back. Guess which part of our brain we're operating in then? It's not good. We can't think on our feet. So I'm going to start this video with a little quote, just a tiny little quote. I put this out on Facebook recently and it got some traction. Nobody apologized for how they treated me. They just blamed me for how I reacted. With a dysfunctional person, are you likely to get an apology? Well, we know that's a big fat no. But can you react to their treatment of you in a way that helps you to feel better about yourself? Hell yes, you can. And that's why I've put this video out, so that you can manage your response to it far better by understanding this. So little legends. I've talked about the importance of acceptance before, and I've also touched on how those expectations play into this on my video in managing toxic family relationships. I've talked about acceptance in good mental hygiene video series as well. But I want to dig a little deeper into these two areas today, because there's an important little dynamic that plays out between these two buttes, and it often catches the best of us out. And it all starts with expectations, those great expectations. So we set an expectation, or I would even go as far to say we set up a hope that things will get better, things will miraculously change. Yeah, our circumstances will change. Our partner will change, they'll become more loving maybe, or we'll get that new job and we won't have to put up with this shizzle that we're putting up with at the moment and this awful boss. We'll find the courage to do it one day, and we'll go to that family function and hope that that person who loves to have a go at us is going to behave themselves for once. But then real life experience doesn't meet those expectations, does it? There's nothing but drama at the family gathering. Your boss surpasses all expectations in being dismissive and rude and tells you to JFDI, just fucking do it. Your partner remains as non-communicative as ever, even though you've set up a lovely romantic dinner and tried to create the ambience. They're still the same. The kids are bad-mannered and unappreciative. We're back to square one. Nothing much has changed. So where does that leave us? We set an expectation that it might, but we've set ourselves up for a fall, really, if you think about it. Problem is, and the reason we do this, and the problem we don't always recognize with this, is how others decide to behave is outside of our control. And just hoping that something will change isn't going to necessarily mean that it will. So what's actually encouraged, or what's actually changed to encourage you to truly believe that the outcome you expected was going to manifest itself? What's encouraged you to truly believe that was the case? What evidence do you have to support that? How do you know? Have you set those boundaries and communicated them clearly? Probably not. Have you had that conversation with your partner to try to understand why they're behaving differently towards you? And have you actually spelled out the potential consequences if you don't work this out? This can't go on. We can't stay together if we can't work it out. Have you set boundaries with the kids? Good behaviour is rewarded, bad behaviour, don't get the goodies. You know, have you sought out help in dealing with your bullying boss, or are you just putting up with it? So this is what I mean about setting those expectations based on evidence and what is actually really happening. And if you can answer yes to all of those questions I've just posed, then you're beginning to enter into the realm of accepting, oh, we've got Houston, we've got a problem here, and something needs to be done. And if you answered no, then just maybe on some level there is an element of denial playing out in you. This isn't here to, I'm not here to judge you, and I'm not here to speak about denial in this video, because that's a whole other subject that I could spend ages on. But all I can say that staying in denial means nothing will change. Denial is always based in fear on some level, either fear of change itself, or fear that if the thing that happened did manifest itself, oh, it'd be the end of the world and I'd never live again, which he will have you believe. And it also means, and this is the sad thing for me, you don't recognize your personal power in all of this. To make positive changes for you, and most likely you need some support with that, because that's not an easy one. And I'm not just going to pay lip service to it in a video. It's a complicated area. So before we move on to acceptance, let's just explore a little bit more about what happens when things don't go as expected then, shall we? So we start to do what I call burn precious energy. Our whole being, our whole life force goes into railing against this outcome. We literally have what I call a victim elder movement. I don't believe it. We do. Yeah. What more do I have to do? This isn't fair. I don't need this. You're stupid for thinking things would change. And then a really interesting dynamic that throws itself up is, I don't want to have to deal with this. I shouldn't have to deal with this. Well, more on that one later. This list is endless, but we fight what's happened. Yeah, we shout, we cry, we scream. We're full of fear and anger and frustration, and that's okay. And the worst thing is we beat ourselves up. That's the worst thing. But let me ask you this question. All of that fear, anger, frustration, all of that energy, does it change the outcome you've just experienced? I'll take that as a no. So, moving on to acceptance, how would things be different if you accepted that whatever it was, that shitty thing, just happened? However unfair, inconvenient, frustrating, or upsetting, we say, yeah, that's just happened. That person has just treated me with no more respect and shut on the end of their shoe. Yeah, they just did that and they just thought that was okay to do that. Wow. Simply by being able to immediately flip into acceptance mode, it has three key advantages in my experience. The first and most important one I've talked about before. We don't get into that emotional part of our brain. So we make better decisions in the moment. We think on our feet. We handle things better in that moment. We also realize in that moment that something needs to change. We may need a period of reflection to know what that is. We might not get the answer instantaneously, but we know on some level that isn't right. I'm not going to let that continue to be a problem, and I need to deal with it some way. I'm not sure how yet. I'm going to go away and reflect on that. But we go into solution mode. This is what I mean when we go into solution mode. And we start putting then, the third thing, much more of our energy into finding and taking positive action and finding solutions than we do into shouting and screaming about what has just happened, the thing we can't change because it's just happened. So we're not doing all that negative rumination, as I call it, that negative introspection about what's happened. But we are so conditioned, aren't we, to non-acceptance? And it's a habit we've gotten ourselves into. And I'm not, if you only have to look at what goes on in the media, and people want, when the pandemic hit, people wanted answers, they wanted certainty. Surely somebody has to know the answer. The government should know the answer now. Well, it was absolutely not like that. It was a totally new situation with a whole new and bigger population of people. We were never going to have the answers straight away. And I'm not defending anything that happened or any decisions that were taken, but I'm just stating the facts as they are. Things can become unprecedented, and sometimes we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable until the facts present themselves and we have time to reflect. Because the problem is, there's no certainty in life. There's no real certainty in life. There are no cast iron guarantees. And we need to become much more flexible in our mindset to be able to cope with that when it happens. And this is where we all get into trouble mentally, when we set ourselves up with a unrealistic expectation that everything's going to be absolutely perfect and we're never going to experience, never going to happen to me syndrome. So I'm just going to tell you this really funny story that illustrates this point. It helps to understand the difference between accepting a situation and not accepting a situation. It's about a holiday I went on with my husband, Andy, several years ago before we were married. We went to Fuerteventura. And yes, I did still marry him, despite what happened. And I do have his permission to tell this story. So we're on holiday in Fuerteventura. And we are staying in a hotel that's on a massive hill. I mean, the hill is like that. Those were my fitter days. I used to run up the hill, I used to walk up it, but there were certain guests staying in the hotel who couldn't. And so the bus would put on a service that would pick people up from the hotel, drop them down the bottom of the hill. There'd be a huge queue of people waiting down the bottom of the hill to be picked up and bussed back up the hill. We never took that bus. However, on this one occasion, we had had a really busy morning. I think we'd been in the gym and we'd been doing other stuff. And we decided it would be really nice to get the bus into town. Now, the resort actually had a bus that went a couple of times a day into town. So it didn't just go down the bottom of the hill, it actually drove into town. So we were told in reception at 2 o'clock, that bus would be turning up to take us into town. So we turn up already, half an hour goes by, no driver. So Andy goes to the receptionist and says, oh no, he's coming in a minute, he'll be here very shortly. 2:45, Andy's just about to go and order a taxi, bus driver turns up, great. Loads of us have turned up by now, loads of people are waiting, we all pile on the bus. Bus driver starts the bus up, down the hill we go, and then it stops and everyone gets off. And I start laughing. This big smile erupts over my face because I just realised we've waited 45 minutes and this bus is only going down the hill. We've just done the one thing we said we weren't going to do. Not Andy. No. He immediately starts, that can't be it. And I'm saying, I think you'll find that, is it? No, it can't be. It can't be. I'm going to have a word with the driver. So he goes and has a word with the driver who can understand English, but not brilliantly. Well, surely there's been a mistake. This bus goes into town. And the bus driver, no, it doesn't go into town. No, it said in reception, this bus goes into town, and they're having this exchange. And they said, you mean to tell me I've waited 45 minutes for a bus that could go down the bottom of the hill? I could have walked into town by now. And the bus driver's just like, well, what do I do with this? So I said, right, let's get off. So we get out, and Andy's getting quite upset by this point because he still failed to accept what's just happened. So we're stood outside the bus with this long queue of ladies and gentlemen waiting to go back up the hill. And then the meltdown comes. I'm saying, look, I just think we should go and try and find a taxi. No, honey, this is insane. You mean to tell me people wait at the bottom of this hill waiting for this bus for 45 minutes when like they could have walked up the hill in that time. And they all stood there watching him have this meltdown. And I am feeling cringed out by now, cringed out. But also I can see the funny side of it. And I managed to persuade him to walk under an underpass to calm him down and get him away from these people, because he was showing himself up. He was showing me up. And I said, are you going to calm down now? Because I think I'm going to have to slap you around the face. And I said, but you mean to tell me we've just waited 45 minutes? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah. And I think it's bloody hilarious. And I started laughing. I said, and your behaviour is even more hilarious. And I started laughing even more. And by this time, I am in fits of laughter. And he starts laughing. And he started to see the funny side of it. But you can see what I mean when you dissect what happened there and how long it took him to come round to that acceptance, the difference in the behaviour between him and I immediately, I didn't like it. I thought, oh, I can't believe that's just happened. Of course I did. But I did see the funny side of it. All of that frustration, all that emotion, that behaviour, on one level, it's quite amusing, but it didn't change the outcome one little bit. We still had to get a taxi or walk into town. Those were our two options. We had two options and we had to pick one, simple as. Right, now back on to the point. But I think it demonstrates the difference perfectly, that story. And when we say to ourselves, back onto that thing I said earlier, I don't want this to happen. I don't want to have to deal with this. When we say that to ourselves, when things don't go as we expected, we go through a kind of what I call grieving process. We hang on to dear life for the outcome we wanted, despite the fact it hasn't come to pass. And of course, that's totally appropriate when you lose someone close to you, when you lose a loved one. That is totally and utterly appropriate. Wading through grief can take time. It takes patience, it takes self-love. And when we do finally come out the other side of grief, that's because we've come to terms with the loss. We've accepted the loss. We feel ready to let that person go. We feel ready to say goodbye. Doesn't mean life will ever be the same, but we found a way to live without that person present. It doesn't mean that they won't ever mean the world to us. They always will. But we found a way to move on and live life without that person present or without that circumstance present. The whole process of grief is in coming to an acceptance. But that grieving process doesn't serve us in everyday life situations. If you're putting up with a job that hasn't turned out as expected, or a boss that hasn't, a promotion, boss hasn't turned out as expected, we get caught up on how people should respond to us, how they should make us feel, how they should behave. What we feel is reasonable, unreasonable. And the problem is with that it puts us straight into a sort of victim mentality where we feel powerless to change the outcomes around us. You feel, again, where is your personal power in this situation? Because you do have it, my little darlings, it is there. It comes down to a matter of choice. Remember, you can't control how other people behave, only how you respond to it. So do you want to respond to it by immediately going into acceptance mode and then thinking, right, I need to go away and think about this because I'm not putting up with that in future. And I'm going to go back and have that conversation when I've reflected and I know exactly how I'm going to couch it. Let me tell you this, the one takeout from this video, you are all little legends and you are never, ever powerless in any situation. So if we can quickly bypass that grieving process and go straight into acceptance mode, guess which part of our brain remains in charge? And it's certainly not him. The rational part of our brain stays in charge. We can think on our feet in the moment. And I always say, it's always a mantra of mine in life, you get the outcomes you want by creating the circumstances that you need. And to create those circumstances, you need real clarity on what you want, how you need to go about getting that in order to create success, not necessarily by rubbing at people the wrong way either. You've got to have a certain level of self-awareness, treating others as you want to be treated. So that means you need to be clear on that whole piece about how you want to be treated and what isn't acceptable to you. But also about how you keep people on side who are important to you. Because not everyone, despite the fact you may get on really well with somebody, you're not going to agree on everything. Learning to be able to agree to disagree. And once you have that clarity, the work begins on how you can establish those boundaries to ensure that that happens and you get those outcomes. And this is such a complex area. I can't give you a one-size-fits-all exercise to go away and think about. But I would just encourage you to think about the points I've raised here. Do you accept or do you fight? And what do you want? What do you actually want? Never mind what you don't want. What do you actually want? Focus on what you do want and how you want to be treated. Because the questions I'm raising here are all encompassed in working on your self-awareness. And when I work with people, that's the key area that we work with, is to raise your self-awareness. I don't do that. I have to get people under what I call intellectual control first, so that he isn't running the show and they can actually start some of the fog lifting and start thinking clearly about what they want. But this kind of work in the solution-focused way brings us into that self-awareness. And the benefit of having self-awareness is that you become a master of yourself. You develop that self-mastery. And self-mastery is very powerful in today's world. Being able to accept that has frustrated me, that has made me really angry, but I'm not going to respond in the way that person would like, because I'm just going to lose the argument. I'm going to reflect on the best way to respond and come back. Self-mastery, it encourages a magnetic personality. And self-mastery is really attractive to other people. Why is that? Because you come across as authentic. Yeah, you come across as someone who has their shit together, so to speak. And people like that. People feel safe with that. People trust that. So guess what? It's about choices again. How do you want to be treated? And what do you want? And how do you want to come across? And this is the key to help you on that journey. So I'm going to leave that there with you, my little darlings. I want you to take very good care of yourselves out there. I hope you found this playlist, these 3 videos, informative and helpful. Take very good care out there. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.